Well, hey, friends, welcome to Lead Culture. I'm Jenni, Catron, your host, and today I am with Hal Donaldson. Hal is the president of Convoy of Hope, which is a nonprofit organization with a driving passion to feed the world. Now, some of you listeners may remember that Hal joined us back in June of 2020. I had to go back and pull up the archives to go, I know Hal was on the show, but it was June of 2020, and I think a lot of things were still a blur. So, Hal, I'm really grateful to have you back. I think we'll have a little bit different conversation than we probably will in June of 2020. And I'm excited to catch up. So thanks for joining me.
Oh, thank you, Jenni. I appreciate you having me back.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to be at a stage in podcast life where I'm starting to have return guests, and just the journey that we are all on as leaders. The episodes show up so differently. The conversations, change shape, even though functionally you're still doing the same work. But there's so many things that we're learning and growing as leaders, over the course of time, that it's always fascinating to catch up. So I'm looking forward to that. But I know we've probably got a lot of new listeners as well who would just love for you to give us a little more of a picture of who is Convoy of Hope. What do you guys do? Just kind of fill in the gaps there.
Yeah, for sure. Convoy of Hope has three pillars internationally, and we feed over 500,000 children every day in schools. By feeding them in schools, the parents keep them in school. If they're not fed in school, the parents are going to have them begging or scavenging off of garbage heaps. So that's really important. Secondly is we train thousands and thousands of mothers every year, helping them start their own businesses, and so they can feed their own kids. And then the third pillar is agriculture. We help families and farmers learn how to increase their yields. Wow. And so every year, tens of thousands of farmers and families are going through our training and learning to really produce food for themselves. And then another leg would be worldwide is we respond to disasters. So whenever there's a natural catastrophe or a war, you can count on Convoy of Hope to be there. We're also very involved in communities across the United States and Europe, helping them do outreaches in their communities. So those are some of the things we're involved in.
Yeah. Well, we were talking before we started recording that Crosspoint in Nashville, the church that I had served at for a number of years, you guys more recently had partnered with them on some work. And I'm just so grateful for the multiple different ways that you guys serve. Give me a little, so I'm curious about this. I want to dig today into just kind of your journey as a leader for you, for the team, et cetera. But as you were talking about those different areas of focus for you guys, did it start out with that kind of clarity, or how did that journey of, hey, this is what we do, how did that evolve over time?
Yeah, I never have had a master plan. We started 28 years ago with a pickup truck, and I think this part of the story. I'd gone to Calcutta, India, to write a book. I have a journalism degree, and I met Mother Teresa, and I was interviewing Mother Teresa, and in the course of the interview, she just asked me what I was doing to help the poor and the suffering, and I replied, well, I'm really not doing much of anything. And she said, well, everyone can do something. Just do the next kind thing that God puts in front of you. And so, I came back to the States, and I began with a pickup truck 28 years ago with $300 worth of groceries. And so, Jenni, I really never had a master plan. God has never showed me where he was taking me, over the next 5 years. It's almost like, if I could use this analogy, it's almost as if God put a yellow brick road in front of me, and he asked me to be obedient to the first step that he illuminates. And so he illuminates one step, I'm obedient to that step, then he'll illuminate the next step. And that's how our journey has been these 28 years. And I know that's not a great way to maybe start a business, but I've always said that I believe that this is God's business. It's his ministry. He knows what he wants next. And, every time we've tried to do strategic planning, like a 5 or even 3-year plans, God has always surpassed what we dreamt was possible. And, today Convoy of Hope is according to Forbes, it's one of the 50 largest charities in the nation. There's 1.5 million charities.
That's
amazing. Convoy of Hope is in the top 50, and we began with a pickup truck 28 years ago. So whatever we're doing, God's making it work. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. I think, I've been wrestling with this. It's the end of the year. And I'm just, trying to think and plan for the next year. And I was journaling. I have to journal my prayers because I'm one of those people that I get too distracted if I'm not like, actively journaling and writing out the prayer. And I'm writing this out, and I'm asking God for the vision and direction for the year ahead.
Mhm.
And I think I was almost asking for something big and audacious and exciting. And rarely do I feel like I get that kind of vision. But I think, similar to you, I think that faithfulness of the next step is such a critical principle for leaders of like, what is that next step God is asking us to take, and how do we stay faithful to that? And so, just to hear you kind of summarize it that way, of that faithfulness of what he's given you next. And then you look back on how many years, you said how many years Convoy of Hope has been?
Yeah, 28 years. Yeah,
28 years. Yeah. Phenomenal.
I think on along those lines, Jenny, sometimes, we think in terms of needing tall vision. I think sometimes we need small vision.
Mhm.
And, I think for me, I never set out to feed the world. That wasn't what I was feeling compelled to do. I was feeling compelled to feed that one person that God put in front of me. And, I believe that vision is often incremental. It begins with helping the one, serving the one, having your heart in the right place so you can serve the one. And then God takes that step of obedience and he multiplies it.
Mhm.
And that's certainly been the story of Convoy of Hope. Yeah, there really hasn't been this master plan as much as there's been a desire to have our hearts in the right place
Mhm.
and to invite God to put people in front of us who really need help.
Yeah, I love that perspective so much, because it's also probably a thing that keeps you going from day to day. I think sometimes what can I do? The person that's in front of you, the $300 of groceries in your pickup truck. It's like, okay, that's what I can do, in a sense of like, I'm taking action on something, versus sometimes I think we can come up with a grand idea or a big audacious goal, but the from here to there feels impossible, and so we just abandon it. So I love that idea of vision is often incremental.
Yeah,
Uh, how do
yeah,
you, how do you yeah, do you get pushback on that? Because I think we live in a culture where everybody wants it to be grandiose. And do you get pushback when you share that?
I don't know, pushback. I think it's maybe surprise. And
Mm.
like 5-6 years ago, I stood up in front of a group of people, and I said, we believe that God wants us to feed 1 million children every day at school. And at the time, I think we had, I don't know, maybe a few thousand children in our program. And so it's not that we don't throw out audacious goals. I think it's probably more the case of making sure those goals are from God,
Mm.
making sure that it's something He wants to accomplish. And you touched on it briefly, with the whole issue of compassion fatigue. If it's you, if it's Jenni who is doing all the work, and you feel like the pressure's on you to do the work, you will experience compassion fatigue. But if you
Mhm.
see yourself as a channel through which Jesus can touch the world, um, it's really him who's doing the work. I'm just really saying I'm available, I'm willing.
Sure.
Uh, and I think that's what we said 5-6 years ago. Lord, if it be your will, we're willing to feed 1 million children every day. And, I think the last number I heard, it was 524,000 children,
That's amazing.
but so it's not that we don't have audacious goals. We do.
Right. Yeah.
We just make sure that they're coming from the right source, which is God the Father.
Yeah. I love that perspective, because I feel the tension in that so much of it is, I'm available and willing. It's his, if this is your will, if this is what you want to do, God, I'm willing and available to be a part of that, versus feeling like you're responsible to make it all happen, which becomes a really overwhelming and lonely place to be.
Yes. Very well
Um,
said.
do
Very well
you
said.
talk about your journey as a leader through the growth of this ministry? Because, there's a huge difference from that $300 worth of groceries in a pickup truck to $2 billion in relief funded, so tell us about some of those key moments of growth for you, maybe some kind of aha points or pivot points or just right sizing moments that allowed you to keep growing as the ministry has grown so significantly.
Yeah, I don't want to get spooky with you, but I will say this. I think in the early days, I saw this spiritual journey as being peaks and valleys.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at it differently now. It's more linear than that. I think that when your mission is right, when you're doing what Jesus has called you to do, this is really the rhythm of your life. It's going to be hardship followed by miracles, hardship followed by miracles. And I think when you understand that, when the hard times come, it's easier to dream about the miracles and to believe for the miracles. And that's certainly been the journey I've been on. I will tell you, like in the early days, probably the first year, my wife and we felt like we had given everything we could, and we were tired, and we felt like we were being patronized, and we wanted to give up. And again, we just gave God an ultimatum. I'm not recommending people do that, but we did.
Right?
We did. We said, okay.
Desperate times, right?
We're desperate. We said, God, we need to hear from you by the Fresno, California outreach. We were giving out, thousands of pounds of food that day. And I just said, God, something has to happen. Something has to break in the heavenlies. And a man walks up, stranger walks up, and he hands me an envelope. And inside was a check for $25,000, but there was also a note in that envelope. And the note simply said, God is with you. And they had underlined the word is. And I have to tell you, Jenni, that was just like a message from heaven, like keep going. Another time had to do with money, because a lot of times the challenge in the early days of starting a charity or starting a ministry is money, and having the resources to do what you feel called to do. Another time we needed $53,000 in 48 hours. And so I took out a little Post-it note and I wrote 53,000 in 48 hours. And I stuck it in my desk. The next day, a man walked in unannounced, didn't know anything about our need. And he pushed an envelope across my desk. And inside was a check for $53,000 and exactly what we needed. So naturally I asked him, I said, Bob, can you explain to me how you came up with $53,000?
Right.
And his response was that he'd had an extraordinary year in business, and his bonus was $530,000. He was in between churches, and he just felt led to give his tithe to Convoy.
Wow.
And so, I don't encourage people to give their tithe to Convoy of Hope or to ministries like ours, but that was one time I wasn't going to say no.
That was too clearly an answer to prayer right there, that you're like, I'm not arguing with that one.
Exactly right. Yeah.
That's amazing. What has helped sustain you as a leader in those, you reference peaks and valleys, the hardships followed by miracles, and 28 years is a long obedience in the same direction, right?
Yes.
And what has helped sustain you as a leader? Like, who do you surround yourself with? What are you learning from? What's that infrastructure that has kept you thriving and healthy and keep maintaining that perspective and that heart for the work that God's called you to?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think first and foremost, God gave me a wife who is incredibly understanding, who is as passionate about our mission as I am, and then we have 4 daughters, and ages 22 through 32, and I think one of the things that's happened through the years is that our daughters we have a very close relationship with them. And they've spoken into our lives. They've learned to speak truth. And but then there is an inner circle of non-family members that I'm talking to on a regular basis. I tend to mentor quite a few leaders I would say. And maybe befriend is probably a better word than mentor. Befriend, listen, advise when asked. But when you are giving out, when you're pouring out, you have to have some people pouring in.
That's right.
And right. And in my case, I have about 4 or 5 80 somethings, people in their 80s who have more experience than me. They have seen life from a different perspective than I have, but those are people I rely on.
Mm,
You know, they may not understand the culture as well as younger people do, but they've been through battles.
yeah.
And yeah, so that's pretty much what I do. I have an amazing team, and I'll brag on our team at Convoy of Hope. These are people who are so committed. They're not here for money. They're not here for fame. They're not here for anything other than the mission. And I find real joy in coming to work every day, working alongside people like that.
Yeah, that's so good. I want to dig into the team side of it because I can't help not. That's such a passion point for me, is the dynamics
Yeah.
of team and culture, and just there's something so I remember very distinctly, and the listeners have probably heard me say this way too many times, but I'll say it all the time because it just is so clear to me. When I was, in my early stages of my career, I was so ambitious and driven, and it was all about me, whether I really was conscious of that or not. And, there's still plenty of that. But I remember when I got to a stage of really experiencing the opportunity to work with a team and see our work done through a group of people collaborating together. And it was like no greater joy, like being able to see somebody that I've been partnering with, or that I hired, and then seeing them thrive and flourish and, do more things. Like there was something so significant and powerful in that. And again, it just is one of those things that brings me so much life and joy. I'd love to hear some of the journey for you. So those early days, it's you and your wife, you start probably adding a couple of staff. Talk about that, because what's the staff? How many staff do you guys have now?
I think we're just right around 500, maybe 500 people, something like that.
Yeah. So talk about some of those early stages. And I'm sure I'm going to ask you a zillion questions on top of that, but I'd love to hear about the team. Yeah.
Yeah. So the early stages is that I think God took a group of people who were already in friendship. They were already in relationship. They had trust. And so Convoy of Hope was built on that foundation of friendship. As someone has said, that God builds upon the foundation of unity. And I think that certainly was the case. One of the things that I do believe is that God he entrusts to those he trusts. And if he trusts you, he's going to entrust more to you. And so from the early days, as a group, we just said, hey, let's do things right. And let's create a culture that God can trust. And you do that, you create that culture by doing the right thing, even when it hurts. Just do the right thing. Secondly, don't put your name in lights. Don't build it around your name, your personality. This belongs to God.
Yeah.
Have unity. And I used to think, Jenni, that that you could create momentum with organizational and financial decisions. But somewhere along the line, I realized that no, you don't create momentum, you invite momentum by making the right decisions. And so that's really what I believe we've done here at Convoy of Hope. We have positioned ourselves under the spigot of God's blessing. We feel like we're being drenched in his favor. And it's because we've tried to do things right. I have a journalism degree, as I mentioned. And so, I've always thought, like, okay, if we're going to start a charity, let's start a charity that where the IRS or the local media, the national media could walk in the door and you have nothing to worry about because you're so clean. And so that's really what we've attempted to do, just trying to do things right. And God's blessed that.
That's so good. I've always felt that conviction of, shouldn't Christian organizations be the best representation of doing the right thing, right? If, like IRS walks in and there's there's nothing to see here, you know, like, because
Exactly.
we're committed to doing the right thing, and that being such a huge testimony to the work that we're doing. Love that so much. That the idea of you invite momentum by making the right decisions, right? That is huge. Because
Yeah.
I think we do. I'm prone to being a strategist, you know, trying to figure out what are the right things to do at the right time to accomplish the, you know, the results that you want. And it's like, I'm so innately wired for that. And for as much as you can try to manufacture that, you can't. I once had a leader say to me, chase momentum, like, because it was such a fragile thing that, like, not really chase momentum, but steward momentum. That was more of the essence of it, right? That it's like, when you had momentum organizationally, it's such a precious thing that you had to be conscientious of stewarding that. But I love how you framed we're inviting momentum by doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So
Well,
powerful.
I think a lot of times people don't realize this, ministries don't realize this, but they're putting a ceiling on what God can accomplish because they lack unity, and they are they really need publicists because they're trying to puff up their name, you know, and I think that takes away from God's blessing. And so at Convoy, we talk a lot about humility. Um, humility is a big part of it because the day you think it's about you and you think it's about, you know, promoting your name, is the day that God's blessing will leave. And I believe that God's blessing is fragile. I believe that you can forfeit his blessing by making poor decisions, by getting full of yourself. When you get full of yourself, you no longer hear his voice. And you know, that's not something we want to do. We want him to trust us. And if he trusts us, he'll entrust more to us.
That's big. So talk to me about you know, you've expressed a number of these things, that foundation of friendship, that doing the right thing, the humility piece. I hear values that were so critical to your team. How did you continue to instill that as the number of staff you know, grew beyond to the number of people you can communicate to on a daily basis? Like, talk about how you maintained that heart of the ministry through all the growth stages.
Well, first, you do have to practice what you preach. You have to live it out as a leader, right? And
right.
you can spew out all the words you want, but if you're not living it day to day, then it's not going to go very far. And I think, you know, I've really tried to do that. I'm not perfect by any means. I'm far from perfect. I'm flawed like everyone else, but I really have tried to model it. And but then secondly, I've really tried to hire well. I've tried to hire people who have the same DNA. And I think because, you know, your vice presidents need to be able to model what you're trying to model for their teams, and then senior directors, and then so forth. So I think that's really important. But I think you could go to anyone in the organization, and they would tell you that Convoy of Hope cares for them as individuals more than we care about what they can do for Convoy. We care about their families. We care about their birthdays and their Christmases, and you know, we do some things to really help them invest in the time in their family, probably that are foreign to other organizations. But for us, I'm not trying to squeeze the 50-hour, 60-hour weeks out of them. You know, that's not what we're trying to do. We work really hard. I don't mind telling you that. We all work really hard, but it's because we are self-motivated and by the mission. And it's not because we are lording over people. We don't do that.
Sure.
So I think those are some of the things, Jenny, that we probably do that have been right.
Sure. Yeah.
And we encourage people to make their vacation time sacred.
Yeah.
Spend time with your family.
Just really emphasizing those pieces of, you know, we do bring our whole selves to work. And I think leaders that recognize that and are emphasizing that the health of all of who we are as individuals is so key. What are some of the real practically, because people are always curious about this,
Yeah.
especially in larger organizations and organizations that have grown like you guys have. What are the rhythms of, how often is the whole team together? Like, do you have a central office? I'm imagining the team gets pretty scattered pretty quickly on these different projects and things. So just give us some of just the practical dynamics of how your team functions.
Yeah, so Convoy of Hope has been divided up into a number of buildings and locations, and not only here in the States but internationally. And so one of the things that we felt inspired to do, again, sounds like an audacious goal, but we said, all right, what if we built an international headquarters that was suited to us, but also built a training center so that we could train people all over the world from this one location. And so, Jenni, we put this up on the board that we were not going to spend not one dime from our mission. We weren't going to deflect money from our mission.
Yeah.
We were going to raise this money without a capital campaign. We're just going to raise it talking to friends.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been able to raise $60 million. And so it's going to really help us, quite honestly, to be able to centralize.
Yep.
And I've had, I won't do any name dropping, but some of the most well-known leaders, Christian leaders in our country, have all told me the same thing. The secret sauce of Convoy of Hope is the culture. And I think it's true. I do think it's true. And so, I think we'll be able to just having all our people in one location will be pretty special.
That is a huge statement. I agree with you that getting everybody in one place will be really special.
We open next summer, by the way.
Oh, yay! So can I make a drop-in visit? I'll just invite myself.
We would love to host you. Absolutely.
I love it. That's so exciting. But that is a huge statement that the secret sauce of Convoy of Hope is the culture.
Yeah.
So again, what are they noticing when leaders have told you that? What do you think they're experiencing?
Yeah, I think they're seeing one person after the other have a humble spirit, and not try to be salespeople. We don't twist anyone's arm. We believe that people are looking for an organization where the mission that we under promise and over deliver. We operate with integrity. We do what we say we're going to do. I think those things speak volumes. And like when I told this to someone just last week, who is a major donor, I just said, I'm driven by several things. I love the poor, I love Jesus, but I'm also driven by the fact I don't want to disappoint you. I realize that every dollar is precious. It's precious. And especially with the economy the way it is, that I just want to make sure that we use those dollars wisely and glorify God. But I don't want to disappoint the donor. That still drives me. Yeah.
Which is, and the fact that is still front and center for you, even when the numbers of those dollars have increased, right? And when it's 300, that's really concrete and tangible. When it gets into the billions, it's hard to even wrap our head around that. And so I love that you can still bring it down to this donor in front of you who's giving their resource. I used to say this all the time when I was an executive pastor at a church, talking to our team. That person who just dropped money into the offering plate, who wrote a check, paid on, gave online, whatever mechanism they did, they're funding this mission out of their faith and obedience. And what a sacred responsibility we have to be entrusted to steward that. So I love that is still what drives you, is seeing that individual commitment and sacrifice, of every person who donates.
It is a big part of it. And I'll tell you one story that it just, it almost brings me to tears even now, but I was speaking at a large church, and I tell you it's large just because I want you to understand what I saw. I saw a woman running from all the way back of the auditorium, and she came running toward me as I was stepping off the platform. And I didn't know if she was going to tackle me or hug me. I mean, I didn't know what to
Like, what's
expect, right?
about to happen here?
Yeah, there's something going on. She's sprinting, and she came and she just threw her arms around me, and she squeezed two $1 bills into my hand, and she whispered in my ear. She said, "Use this to feed a hungry child." And she turned around, walked away, and I noticed that her dress was two sizes, probably too large. She was wearing tattered sandals, and so I asked the pastor who was next to me. I said, "Who was that?" And he said, "Hal, she's homeless. She probably gave you all she has."
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, and I held those $2. I replaced the $2. I gave it to Convoy, but I kept those $2 in my wallet for a long time because
Mm,
as a reminder that every dollar is precious
hmm.
and that we have a responsibility to use them wisely.
Yeah, that's remarkable. Such a powerful visual of that level of just sacrifice and commitment to the
Yeah.
mission. Hal, I'd love for you to share. I know you guys have been doing a lot of work in the Ukraine, and I'd love to get an update there before we have to wrap up, because we're already like, I'm like, I could keep asking you questions. You're such a great wealth of just
Thank you.
perspective and wisdom and insight. So thank you for sharing with us. I feel like I just am getting to glean from your wisdom and the time that we got to spend together. But tell us a little bit about some of the active things you got, like some of these key projects you guys are in the middle of. Specifically, I know Ukraine's been a big one for you all this year. So I'd love to hear about what's happening there.
Thank you for bringing it up. And we're about to enter the winter months, and so it's kind of a crisis time. And the
Yeah.
media has moved on, and they're covering other stories or covering elections and this sort of thing. And but the need is just it's so great. I think to date the Lord has enabled us to distribute like $55 million worth of emergency supplies in Ukraine. We have 300 plus hubs, they're churches inside Ukraine, and we are servicing them, resourcing them on a regular basis just to make sure that needs are met. But it's really a time of crisis, and I hope that the world's attention pivots back to Ukraine, because organizations like Convoy of Hope, I hate to say it, but CNN, Fox, MSNBC, the major networks, when they cover a story, it allows us to get more resources in the door to help more people. And
Yeah.
so I'm hoping the media will pivot back during these really crisis months. But
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you to everybody who has given. You've really enabled us to do what we said we're going to do, and that's to feed the masses. We have.
So good. So good. Hal, if somebody wants to connect more, donate, where can they go?
Yes, convoyofhope.org, convoyofhope.org.
Perfect.
And we appreciate any inquiries.
Fantastic. Well, we'll make sure we connect to that in the show notes, convoyofhope.org. And thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for the work that you've done, your heart and spirit behind it. Just so encouraging every time I get to connect with you or somebody from the team and just continue to hear the great work you're doing. Incredibly inspiring, and really grateful for your wisdom today. So thanks for sharing with us.
Thanks for having me on, Jenny, and congratulations on the podcast as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Friends, thank you for listening. Be sure to go check out convoyofhope.org. Great organization for you to partner up with and donate through to help just see great impact in the world. And if you loved this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, share it with a friend who would be encouraged by what Hal had to share with us today. And until next time, keep leading well.